Okay, subsurface flow wetlands, constructed wetlands. They're very, very common throughout Europe and in the USA. For some reason, they've never really got going in Australia, where they ought to, because this is the best climate for them. They love it warm, they love it dry. They're capable of producing very good quality water for most uses, and I'll show you some of these in a minute. With very little or no energy, very low maintenance, not quite do-it-yourself. I wouldn't recommend that normally, but semi-skilled trainees can manage these perfectly well, and any rural community with some basic farming skills and equipment could build them if they want. The big problem is regulation and the big water utilities who don't want to have a bar of it because it makes them look a bit silly. So all right, now let's start off with right at the beginning. This is a reed bed in Denmark. This is where the Denmark and Germany, where this all started back in the late 70s, 80s. I did my training in Denmark. This one is at a country resort type place. And what I'd like you to do is just have a look, just absorb it for a couple of minutes. Okay, well, you have to understand a bit about wastewater treatment. There are different types, but we're talking about what they call attached growth. The bacteria, the beneficial bacteria, are actually living on the media in the beds and doing the job. It's not a big churned up liquid thing like most effluent treatment plants. And that's the whole basis of them. And, this actually ends up producing an area which is larger than a high energy sewage treatment plant. And the reality is that you're using solar power to do the work instead of electricity. Okay, and that's what they look like. This is a fairly large one. It would handle effluent from about 50 people. That's about 30 by 15, about 450 square meters. Okay, now this is how they work. Not very difficult, eh? They've been going for decades. The bits at the end are large gravel, which is used to distribute the incoming water across the width of the bed and collect it at the other end. And in the middle is where your treatment's occurring. The great thing about reed beds is that once they're set up and running, there is nothing to adjust. It's all in the design. If the design's wrong, you won't get what you want. If the design's right, it'll keep on doing it, probably indefinitely. The older reed beds in Europe have been going for 25 years now, and a lot of the local councils have forgotten they're even there. The surface is level. The water actually flows about there, just below the surface, hence subsurface flow wetland. It's below the surface all the way. These are a composite of about 13 different reed beds, all in Denmark. They're all still running. They were all constructed between 1985 and 1990. And what they're showing here is the reduction of solids, organic matter, nitrogen and phosphorus. And you'll see they all get better with time. Not so much after 10 years, but in the first 2 or 3 years, they're an improving performance. This is just a mirror image. You see, these are the percentage removals as opposed to the absolute values. Now, this meets what they call a basic secondary treatment standard, which by and large is the same standard that all the little package treatment plants in Australia work to. 20 BOD, 30 suspended solids. Some of them a bit of nitrogen and phosphorus reduction, most of them none. And even a rudimentary reed bed can actually remove quite a bit of phosphorus. You can see this is nitrogen removal, nearly 50% after 10 years. And phosphorus, 30 to 40. This is without taking any extraordinary measures whatsoever.
What about salt?
There's nothing in any effluent treatment plant whatsoever that will remove salt except an RO plant, reverse osmosis or nanofiltration. So that's performance. Now, all the reed beds are built inside a liner. This is a large one. This is actually in Brisbane, this one. It's, in terms of size, one of the bigger ones in the world. I'm not aware of any single cell ones that are bigger than this. This is 1,800 square meters of reed bed, which is a lot, believe me. 70 odd meters long and it's 24 meters across. All right, now we move on to the vertical flow wetland. This is the other half of the same treatment plant in Brisbane that we're actually looking at. And it works like this. I think worthy of note here that the high loading rates of 700 millimeters a day, that refers to the depth of water going through a bed. So a square meter of bed loaded with a meter of water is a meter a day. And loaded with 700 millimeters is 700 millimeters a day. Right? It's worthy of note that both in New South Wales and in Victoria, for a traditional sand filter handling effluent, their recommended maximum loading is 50 millimeters a day. 50, not 500, 50. So this is a massive increase. Really massive.
I ask, is there going to be a minimum load?
Yes, the reeds will die if you don't put enough in to keep them alive. Well, your minimum's probably about 20.
20 what, sorry?
About 20 millimeters a day. Because normally, in this climate anyway, in a hot, dry spell in January, you'll easily evaporate 20 millimeters a day. So it's obviously not sustainable for more than a few days before the system will run out of water. So you do have a minimum load, and that's quite correct. This is an attached growth aerobic one, and this is got oxygen available all the time. And the previous one was what they called anaerobic. In other words, it didn't have access to oxygen, so it was being used. Anaerobic bacteria were doing the job. In this case, it's aerobic bacteria, but it's a bit blurred because if you load the vertical bed up towards the 700 millimeters a day, you get some areas which are anaerobic. In other words, you're loading it so heavily that you can't get the oxygen input to sustain bacteria that live in an oxygen supply. And that's pretty good, because what it does, having both in the one, has a big effect on the reduction of nitrogen. If you like, later on when we get to the end, I'll explain how the nitrification and denitrification cycles work, because that's right at the crux of how you design reed beds to get that right if you want to remove nutrients from the system. All right, now the sludge bed. Now, that's me in Denmark in 1999. This is handling the sludge effluent from a sewage treatment plant with a capacity of 11,000 people. This is large, right? There's nearly half a hectare of sludge beds here, and the sludge from the conventional sewage treatment plant is loaded in intervals into this bed, and all the sludge is taken out and eventually composted, and you'll see this in a moment. And you design with a life of 15, 20 years, at which time you take all the compost out, put it on your farmland, replant your reeds, start again. And the water that drains through goes back to the effluent treatment plant for another run. So what you're doing is you're handling all these sewage sludges. And it also has applications in industries like breweries, wineries and things like that, which we'll come to in a moment. This is a large composter. Over time, the detritus from the reeds, which break down, they renew themselves, the leaves and the matter fall in, the sludge gets in there, the roots of the reeds go through all the organic matter, and everything composts down, and reduces in volume, hence the length of time you can go in between times, and just keeps on going for as long as you care to go. So this is a composting device. You start off with a low level in the bed, and over the years that gets higher and higher and higher.
And that gets to 50.
And it's all composting down. So what you've got is reeds growing massively in compost, being fed by the effluent from the whatever process you're putting into it. So you always build at least two beds, because at the end of the day, when you get to the end of the life of one, you've got to switch to one of them and let the final residues compost down properly. And then you have to remove one, run on one, and give it a bit of a beating for a couple of years, compost the rest, take it away, refurbish one bed, and then do the other one. And in between times, you sort of alternate every few months. In the case of that big one, the one I showed you at the start, they've actually got 11 beds. They've got 11 beds because there's a limit to how well you can spread water over a bed that's too big. You've got limits to the size, about 1,000 square meters or so. After that, it gets very difficult to get even distribution of the effluent coming in. So there's a practical size to how big you can build it. So of course, if you need a much bigger one, you've got to build a lot of them. Well, to put it in context, if you desludge your septic tank, it's about 5%. And a normal effluent from a sewage treatment plant, a conventional sewage treatment plant, might be between 0.5% and 1%. The solids.
The liquid effluent.
Yes. What you're doing is you're putting all your sewage in and you're treating it all and you're reducing the volume of the solids and things in it, but you get the solids on the base of all your lagoons and tanks and things, which has to be taken out. So that's taken out on a progressive basis. And in Denmark, at least, they have a lot of these reed beds, sludge reed beds, because you can forget about it for the next 10 or 15 years. And the volume's all reduced. You're reducing your handling costs, you know, all the traffic on the road with all its attendant costs. You have a once-off removal of something which is maybe only 2 or 3% of the original volume that went in. And you've got a very good compost that you can use for agricultural purposes.
15 years is a heck of a long time for composting.
Yeah. Well,
Doesn't it have to happen a lot quicker than that?
well, it does, but you're putting new stuff on the top all the time. Right? The stuff at the bottom, yeah, fine, right? But you've got it at the bottom, and you've got it building up on the top.
As you say, the sludge is drained, composted, and stored for around 15 years.
Yes, not all of it for 15 years, only the first load, only the first year. The last one might be lucky if it gets a year. Like remember I said, when you get to the end, you run on the other bed, and you hammer it for a year, and you let the other one finish composting, and then you take the lot. Okay? All right, now this is the crux of the whole matter. There are a lot of reed beds around, people growing reed beds on an amateur sort of basis, putting in all sorts of fancy reeds, like carex and Schoenoplectus and things like that. But at the end of the day, there's only 2 reeds that are worth a bar of soap in terms of performance in a reed bed. And one's Phragmites australis, and the other is Bamia articulata. And the reason for it is they both can keep their roots alive and supply oxygen down to the depths of round about 1 metre. So you bury them in 1 metre water, and the roots will still go down because they'll still be able to get valuable supplies of oxygen through the plants down to the root tips. The other ones are lucky if they get half of that. Right, so unless you're going to build really shallow reed beds, and the penalty for shallow reed bed is a much bigger area. At the end of the day, what counts is the length of time the water spends in them. Now you can either go deep, right, with a small area, or you can go shallow with a whacking big area. I go deep. That's right. Well, it's not quite the same. There are about 64 different phenotypes of Phragmites. And I know a place where you can go right now, and I can show you 4 different ones within half a mile, and their stands, and when you look at them collectively, you'd say there's 4 different types there. You take them away separately and look at them, and you can't tell the difference. Right. One's tall and thick, one's tall and skinny, and there's a short, thick one and a short, skinny one. and they're within a few hundred metres of each other and a stand, right? They've got that genetic variation on a theme.
And they're native?
They're native everywhere. They're native everywhere.
That's what I mean.
The only place where they're trying desperately to keep them out of is New Zealand, where they will not let them be into the country, and they reckon they haven't got any, but I know that they have because I've seen it. So anyway, look, the whole point about it is you've got this massive root structure, right? And it is massive. You go and try and dig some phragmites out of a wetland, unless you've got a backhoe, forget it. And the thing that you shouldn't be aware of, that nearly 75% of the mass of the plant is actually below the surface. There's only 25% on the top. And they'll keep on telling you, it comes in the reeds, you harvest the reeds, blah, 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 bullshit, you harvest the reeds, right? If you try to do it, the amount of work, you'll try it once and you won't try it again. And the difference you'll make is nothing, because nearly all the mass is below the surface, and all the work's done there anyway.
So what do you do? Let it dry out?
Well, my own bed is in its 11th year, and I cut it back once, year number 6. It took it 2 years to recover. Didn't seem to affect the performance at all, but...
Yeah, when you clean it out.
Well, you can't clean it out. All you can do is cut off the bit at the top. Right? And if you're going to do that, the only reason you'd do it is for aesthetic reasons. You certainly wouldn't do it for performance reasons.
Not for the sludge?
Hmm?
After 10 years? You don't take it out? After 10 years?
No.
The sludge?
No, there's no sludge.
Eh?
No sludge.
No sludge?
You've got a septic tank up front that takes most of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, all reed beds have, or worth their salt, have that. There are one or two that don't, but they have to be much, much bigger to be able to handle it. The septic tank is still the quickest way of getting a 40 or 50% reduction in a very small space cheaply. It's a good primary treatment device, and you're not going to get much better than that in the smaller context of things.
So presumably the outflow of a septic tank tries to emulate one of those systems, though, does it?
Well, no. The septic tank is a straight anaerobic digester at the end of the day. It boils up inside, solids go to the bottom and build a sludge layer, and a crust floats on the top, and your water comes off the middle and goes into your reed bed. You will have reed bed problems if your septic tank gets to the stage it's putting solids straight through, and you've taken up all the space in the tank. And what it does is it clogs up the front of the bed, and then you start getting water flowing over the top, and it starts to smell, and everyone says, oh, a reed bed doesn't work. Anyway, look, this is the key to the thing. If the reeds don't have a huge big rhizome system down in the media, forget about it, right? Okay, so we've got 3 basic types. It's not rocket science, it's how you use them, and using them intelligently that matters. You've got to know the limits, know the limitations, what you can do and what you can't do.
And those 3 types are the
Horizontal subsurface flow, vertical flow bed, and the sludge bed. Okay, let's go on to some examples. Okay, this is a typical one. I had horrors designing this one because it's 240,000 litres a day, and the design I had at the time was for one that was putting about 700 litres a day through, and I just scaled the whole thing up, crossed my fingers and hoped for the best, and it worked. It's got a primary settlement. It's got a septic tank which is 350,000 litres. It's got a horizontal bed.
Is the septic tank, isn't it? The septic tank is the primary settlement.
Yeah, that is the same thing, huh?
Okay.
Well, not quite. They're what they call primary settlement in the major sewage treatment plants. They're talking about 8 and 12 hours settling, right? Whereas a septic tank traditionally has at least 24 hours and preferably about 36, which is what I put in the design here. So it actually goes a bit further than just a primary settlement. But this was done by Brisbane Water, this slide, and that's what they called it, so I wasn't going to argue with them.
So Tony, this is sewage treatment.
This is sewage treatment. This is raw sewage treatment. It actually comes from a rising main, a pressure main, and its purpose is to irrigate a rather high-profile regional park with unrestricted public access watering. In other words, you can run under the sprinklers, right? So it's got a horizontal bed, and that was built in that very large one which I showed you earlier on with the liner. And then it goes to the vertical bed, which is the one I showed you earlier on as well. And then it's disinfected, goes to storage, and then it goes to the irrigation for the park. And that's been running since 2004. Well, the horizontal, if you like, it's primary treatment, secondary treatment, tertiary treatment. It's all in the mathematics of how reed beds work. This one is running with a BOD of less than 5. In other words, it's not detectable. It's below the laboratory limits. The turbidity is about 0.7 as opposed to drinking water, which is about 0.3, and the standard to be met is less than 2. It's got an 80% phosphorus reduction, right, and a 75% nitrogen reduction. So it meets all the criteria for the advanced treatment plants. And it's all done without...
I don't understand why you have a horizontal and a vertical.
Well, the vertical... I wish I had a whiteboard. Does anyone know what plug flow is? No. We're starting to get a bit technical, but when you put effluent into a horizontal bed, right, the water starts from there and it moves in like a wave along here. So in theory, if you put water in here, two days later, the same water comes out here all at the same time. Well, it's not quite like that. It sort of deviates from 100% efficiency, but by and large, it does do that. And one of the mathematics of it is that to get the BOD down, say, from 400 to 200, so 400 to 40, for example, right, which is a 90% reduction, to get it from 40 down to 10 takes the same area again, double the area, but it's logarithmic, it's not linear. If any of you are mathematicians, you can see me afterwards and I'll scratch it on a bit of paper and show you. So what happens, if you want to get down to 20 BOD, then that bed at Brisbane Water that was 1,700 square metres, right, would have had to have been maybe 3 times that size. And there's a limit to how much room you've got. So the idea is to get the pollutants down to a level where you can put them into the vertical bed and not have it clog up. And Ralph will be able to tell you about that later on. So that's why you do it. What you're doing is you're reducing your area and increasing your performance.
Having little water coming through or no water?
It doesn't have to be constant.
No, it doesn't.
It can come in quite large bursts and usually does. And usually does. In the peak period, you'll be putting about 3 times the average capacity through.
Yeah.
And in the quiet times in the middle of the night, you'd be lucky if you're doing about 10% of the flow. But it doesn't matter because there's such a large amount of water in here. It comes in and stops, and then it goes like that, and then it maybe trickles through, and then in the morning it goes like that again. But coming out the other end, it does bear some relationship, but it's very smoothed out.
The primary settlement, does that tend to fill up, and there has to be a sludge removal process?
Yes, about every 5 years.
And what can they do with that sludge?
They take it to their conventional sewage treatment plant, put it in a sludge system, or they build a sludge bed in the same complex and put it in there and compost it over the period of time. But unless it's a very big one like this, it's not economic to build another sludge bed because this one would only be every 5 years. And it's not a huge amount compared with, say, what Brisbane Water already have in their sludge handling facilities. It's easier just to put it in the tanker and take it away and put it into their system. This is actually this one actually had 3 chambers. It was 3 by 100-odd thousand. And the last one, we were getting about 60% reduction before we even got out the primary settlement. We must move on, I think.
Can I ask just a quick dumb question? Why not use all the good the nutrients that were in some of that wastewater rather than killing it all off before you put it on the park?
Because the park's beside a river and you can only put in as much as the grass can take, so you need to have the nutrients tailor-made to the area you want to irrigate. When you do a land capability assessment and work out an effluent treatment, the area required, the limiting factor is almost never water. It's almost always either nitrogen or phosphorus, depending on what the soil's like.
So if you had a farm situation or something, you might not be worrying
You
so
wouldn't,
much.
you wouldn't care, just spread it over a bigger area. Right, this is actually an aerial view. And what you should notice, that's 20 metres. And the houses were built after the reed bed, not before. So buffer zones, virtually not required. Which is very important because they keep on telling you, the big companies, that you can't build these reed beds. Oh, you've got a buffer zone, mate. I can't do this. The area you're taking up's big. Well, quick, it is, but they have a 300 metre buffer zone around theirs. If you take the 300 metre buffer zone in, this kills it. Takes a lot less room. This is pretty high tech, and I'll just flick past these because these are just test results, right? Showing what happened. And now this is a winery wastewater system. We make wine, we crush wine, we get solids, which we screen out. We've got a dirty water tank. It's not a septic tank because the whole idea here is you've got to keep this water moving. If it sits there for more than 24 hours, it'll stink to high heaven. And worse, the higher the organic loads. And winery wastewater is very high organic load. So you've got to get it into this bed quickly. So it goes into this tank, and every day when the end of the shift they hit a button and the tank is pumped empty into the sludge bed. And then it goes to a vertical bed, like the one before, which when it's got rid of most of the solids. Clean water tank, irrigation. And in their particular case, we're pumping it, so well, back to wait a minute, we pump it up a hill and gravity back down to our clean water tanks right next to the dirty water tank, and they irrigate the rose gardens around the winery building. It sits there on top of the bed and gradually composts down, reducing its volume, and X years afterwards, at the end of the day, when it finally fills up, you dig it all out, you spread it on your vineyard, and start again. It's very acidic. I use a special media, which I shall keep quiet about. I've got two different ones I use that I can lay my hands on, and we are putting all the winery ones we've done, and we're on number 5 at the moment, have never required to have any chemicals added to adjust the pH all the way through. This is the one we were talking about. This is the vertical bed, and this is the sludge bed. And you see we built it in a large tank, and the reason we did it is because of space. We had to be able to run the tractor around the end and back down to get in for his spraying. If you think about it, if you build a bed out the ground, you've got a 45-degree slope all around it, and we wouldn't have got the area in if we hadn't done it that way. So we actually got a very neat. This is the same one at Brisbane Water a year afterwards, the first one you saw with newly planted reeds. This is an interesting one. This is a greywater bed in Bega. It's an eco village. They've got 30 homes on it, or planned 30 homes. They're at number 17 at the moment, and these reeds are a lot bigger now, getting bigger by the year. And they take all their greywater. They have composting toilets. All the rest of the water goes into there, and it irrigates their communal ground. In their reticulation system, they've got 3 large grease traps, commercial-sized grease traps, picking up in the lines before it gets into the bed, because it's important you keep the grease out of it. You'd have to go and Google composting toilets, and you'll get that. Me, frankly, I think they're a waste of time because they're expensive, and you can put in a greywater treatment system and reuse the water back to your toilets anyway. So you're not saving any water, all you're doing is getting a little bit of compost that you can use somewhere. Anyhow, this is one at the Wastewater Bush Nursing Centre. This is in Victoria. Now this one is the local primary school. It's got the local bush nursing centre. It's got 20 odd assisted living units, independent living units, different from the typical old age centre. It takes up 200 square metres all up. It sends the water back to the school for their oval. It cost 80 grand to build, and they built it themselves. And the science teacher and the school kids do the maintenance.
Wow.
Does this one have a horizontal bed before?
Yep.
Oh,
That you can just see them there, right?
okay.
This is the vertical bed. There you go. And there's just after it was planted. That's the whole thing. This is an interesting one. It's a 9-bedroom house. And the staff facilities and the hydroponic vegetables they grow for the Sydney market. And a manager's cottage. And that's been on the go for its third year now. That's a horizontal bed, and that's a vertical bed down the end, and it's used to irrigate a citrus orchard. Well, this is dead flat along here, and then there's a cliff goes about 50 feet down, straight off the cliff, and the irrigation area is actually down there. It's all rock. It's rock everywhere. It was a nightmare to build.
But the vertical one's higher than the horizontal.
Yeah, I couldn't put it down deep because it would have been, engineering-wise, it would have fallen down the hill if I'd put it deeper. Right, so I had to put it up.
And have a little pump.
And the little pump in the middle. This is the interesting one. This is the other ones were all ones that I'd built, but just to show you, this one's in Scotland. You've heard of Loch Katrine, everybody? Anybody? Rob Roy McGregor? Rob Roy lived around Loch Katrine, and Loch Katrine is Glasgow's water supply. They have a very large tourist centre with a very large restaurant that seats about 200 people. It gets 400 or 500 visitors a day in coaches, and it runs an old steam ship up and down the lake. A tourist thing which has a big pump out on it, which pumps out into the reed beds. And the reed beds flow out into a stream which goes into Loch Veneca. Loch Veneca is Stirling's water supply. So they have been doing indirect potable recycling for decades with a reed bed. So don't let them take this, carry on and say that you shouldn't do it. That's rubbish. They've been doing it for decades. And this is not a particularly sophisticated reed bed, I'll have you know. This is a village in the Czech Republic. Village systems in France and Belgium, if they're putting a new system in and the village is less than 2,000 people, there's no argument, put in a reed bed. End of subject. Bang, do it. And they do it. This is in England. This is in Saxby. This is 50 people. This is just the one horizontal bed for 50 people. Now, this is a classic example of the size you have to do to get down to less than 20 BRD just in the one bed. It is simpler, yes, that's true. And it's simpler to do. In most of these villages, they've got one of the senior citizens doing the retiree mows, cleans up around the place, has a look at a few things, takes a sample once every 3 or 4 months and sends it into the Water Authority for checking, and that's it. Now this is a water wall. Right, not far from here in Clovelly. And you can put water in and put plants in there, that's fine, but reusing it, definitely you would be in dead trouble. This is domestic greywater system in Newtown. This is the one we based our accreditation on. It's the same as basically as Ralph's one. And you'll see it's not very big at all. Now this lady here asked about stormwater. Now this is a large one in Voyager Point, the Liverpool Council. It's got about 500 homes, a fairly large area, and it basically has a gross pollutant trap to pick up all the Coke bottles and rubbish and stuff, and then it goes into a pond. And if you look over there, maybe you can just see it. It goes into a large pond, and the solids settle down in there, and periodically they get in and have the bucket and backhoe thing, and they take the solids out and clear it. That's all the rough solids. And then it goes in a horizontal flow bed, through the bed, and there's the outlet. And believe me, this is crystal clear water coming out the other end. And then it goes through, meanders through a sort of surface flow wetland, just a sort of conventional sort of wetland pond thing, and goes into the Georges River. So if you've got any questions, go for it.
So why do you need to treat stormwater then, apart from get big bits out of it?
Well, it's a surprising amount of stuff. There's a surprising amount of dog shit and stuff getting around in urban developments. And solids.
Also, that's stormwater that's landed on the ground and gone somewhere.
It's come off the roads. So it's got all the stuff on the roads. It's got oil. It's got stuff from cars, rubber.
It's roof stormwater.
It's not rainwater. No, it's urban runoff, right?
Am I correct saying that Sydney is a bad example for this because their treatment of stormwater in Sydney is not very high, isn't it? They don't. Mostly not. They're a bit better, and they're a lot better than some of these ones out in the western suburbs with all these new places because they're insisting to do something.
What sort of area does that drain?
Well, that's almost as big as the one in Brisbane.
No, but I mean, what's the catchment?
Well, the catchment, 500 homes, have to be about 100 acres.
So really you're talking about doing sort of like a retention pond,
It's got a retention pond
and then from the retention pond, you then...
through the reed bed.
The water to go into the reed bed.
That's right. They're very common. I didn't show an example, but they're very common in England. In England, what they do is they run their stormwater and their sewage in the same channels and same tunnels and pipes. And that's a legacy of way back. They've stopped doing it now. And what it means is that when they get a big flood, there's a huge volume coming through and their effluent treatment plants just can't hold it. So what they've done in some cases, they put one of these reed beds like that in there, in between it. So what happens is under normal low flow conditions, right, the sewage is going through the reed bed, right, with very little stormwater, and then they're taking it from the outlet and putting it in their sewage treatment plant. When they get a big storm, what happens is the first flush, all the dirty stuff goes into the reed bed, and then when it gets too much for the reed bed, it flows over the top and goes straight into the river. But by that time, it's so diluted, it doesn't really matter. And when you consider that in England, most of the rivers are down to the sea within a couple of days at most, any major river system, then it's gone before it's got a chance to do any harm, as opposed to here where it could take months to get down the Murray, for example. Their circumstances are different. They can get away with things in Europe, can't get away with here. Okay, and here is a classic example. I don't know how well focused this one is. This is treating coke ovens waste down at Whyalla Steelworks, South Australia. And believe me, this is rotten stuff. It's got ammonia, phenols, cyanides, you name it, nasties. Coke ovens effluent has got it. So just to show you some of the difficult things you can actually do.
And it'll get some of that stuff out.
Hmm?
And it'll get some of those things out.
Most of it. Most
The
of it.
bacteria consume.
There's plenty of bacteria that love cyanide. If you go to any of the old coke works, dig up the soil there, get soil out, seed your reed bed with it, and they'll multiply like crazy. That's how reed beds work. What they do is the bacteria that like the pollutants will multiply, the ones that don't will go down, so they'll self-adjust for whatever you're putting it through, so long as you give them a little bit of time to acclimatise.
And when the bacteria die, they don't just release those chemicals again. They've converted them
They've converted them, yeah, they've broken them down, you see. They don't like cyanide particularly, but it's a good source of nitrogen and all sorts of other stuff.
What, are you using the same reeds here?
Hmm?
Are you using the same reeds in this?
These are phragmites. These last ones have not been my ones, by the way. None of these last ones have been mine. They've all been other people, right? I don't like to think that I'm the only one who builds reed beds, right? I'm not, right? There are plenty of others who do.
But they'd still be using the same reeds that you recommend.
Phragmites, this is. Phragmites can take almost anything in its stride. It's almost impossible to kill it.
So you're not quite sure where this was done in Wayala?
I do. I know exactly where. Because I used to work. I used to work for BHP and have been to Wayala a few times. I know exactly where it is.
For them too. In Wayala?
Yeah.
Near the blast furnace?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is it Phragmites? Is that right?
Phragmites australis, they call it, but it's Phragmites communis or common reed. It's right round the whole world. Everywhere's got it. This is in Oman. It's oily waste. You all heard of putting bacteria to gobble up oil spills. The reed bed does the same. It's a marvellous home for bacteria that will feed on anything that's there to feed on. As long as it's got carbon, nitrogen and a bit of phosphorus, it will utilise it somehow. And this is removing oil. And this is vast. This is about 4 hectares of reed beds. It's big enough that it's got its own microclimate round about it. It's all a whole pile of individual beds. It's not picking it up. This is a pity. All he's showing is the fence, but this is a natural swimming pool just round the corner from Ralph's place. And they actually are swimming in it now. They swam in it last weekend for the first time. Well, I'm sorry about that because it's a beauty. It really looks good. And it had some nice trickling water sounds.
So what's going on in it?
Hmm?
What's going on in the natural swimming pool? What's interesting?
Well, it's a vertical flow reed bed, right? With a large storage for water underneath it. It holds about 10,000 litres of water underneath the reed bed. So what it does is we've got a fairly large pump that goes about an hour a day. What it does is it takes water out the bottom, puts it in the pool overflows into the reed bed. And also they have a water wall where it goes up to cascades down a waterfall and things like that.
So it's like a combination sand filter and reed bed type of...
Well, it's a vertical flow reed bed, which is by definition a sand filter planted with reeds.
Yeah.
Right? So what it does is it collects all the rainwater. You have no backwashing, no chemicals. No chemicals at all.
Very good.
And so the rainwater builds up underneath. You build a level in the pond. When it's dry, you evaporate. The level underneath goes down a bit. And hopefully it's topped up again with the next rainfall before you've got to add any. So you're not using water. You're not dumping water. You're not using chemicals. And the energy consumption is pretty low because instead of having to pump against a mighty great sand filter pressure, we're pumping against virtually zero pressure. The pump is actually underneath the pond.
And only an hour a day.
And then hour to a day, a bit more in the summer, hardly any in the winter.
A salt pool or something, it's 4 hours or 6 hours in
Yeah,
summer.
something like that. Yeah, so we're just getting to grips with how long you might actually have to run it. But at the moment, it's only doing a couple of hours a day. Actually comes on for half an hour, 4 times a day.
What would happen if you're heating the water, the pool water?
Well, you have to be very careful you don't heat it too much. This actually does have heating underneath it. It has heating because it has to get rid of the excess heat from this all hot water in the summer. Because this is a 6-star house, a bit like Ralph's, right? It's got everything that moves and bells and whistles, but they've got large rainwater tanks. They're 100% on rainwater. They do use the greywater in their garden, and the natural pool takes the rainwater from the pool and the reed bed, of course, picks up that.
So what sort of temperature do you need to keep it?
Well, you've got to be very careful not to go above 24 degrees. It's a magic temperature, otherwise you get algae growth almost like that. So I threatened them with an inch of their lives if they try and even do it. I said, yeah, don't come whinging to me if it suddenly goes off and I find you've been had the... Well, you can use it up to a point. So the deal is that they will use it possibly to do some heating to extend their off-season when it gets to maybe April, May, to keep it running a bit into the winter and start a bit earlier, but then not to try and make it too warm. So that there are limits, as you quite rightly pointed out. You've got to be very careful.